So hey anime fans, the series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with Dragon Balls? So let's start the series. An elderly man with bushy white hair and darkly tanned skin spilled over his notes with a contemplative expression on his face. His name is Dr. Gero of the now-defunct Red Ribbon Army. He had been planning his retaliation against Son Goku, the man who had defeated the evil army when he was just 12 years old, something that the kingdoms of the world had failed to do. The humiliation of that defeat motivated the doctor to find a way to destroy the boy, now man, and seize the world for himself. His research was primarily focused on the development of androids, human-like robots with powers far beyond those of an average human. At first, he had been working with robotic-based androids, but after 16 separate failures, Gero decided to adopt a different strategy: human-based androids. After searching all the major cities, he eventually located two potential test subjects, twin punk teenagers, a boy and a girl, who were homeless and demonstrated a talent for both fighting and survival. Although Gero would have preferred to use a professional martial artist, doing so would have been much more difficult and time-consuming. Eventually, he carried out his plans and removed the two teenagers from the streets, but there was an unforeseen issue. It turned out that the twins had a younger brother, a feist who resisted the larger and stronger adult to reclaim his siblings. Gero managed to subdue the boy and chose to take him as well. Now, the question was what to do with the boy. He thought about turning him into an android as well, but that idea was impractical because the child was only 10 or 11 years old and would not survive the augmentation process. 1. Nevertheless, he didn't want that unadulterated strength and determination to be wasted, so he rummaged through his old papers and found a file named Project Genome. The old man grinned menacingly as he perused the file. He had begun Project Genome a few years prior as the forerunner to Project Cell. The idea was that he would use the DNA of some of the most formidable fighters on Earth, such as Goku, Vegeta, Frieza, and others, to create the ideal body. He would then implant a brain from an already skilled fighter, after it had been properly modified to follow his command, of course, into the body, creating a perfect warrior. However, every subject he convinced to undergo the test was unable to withstand the strain and turned into little more than a vegetable. This led him to start Project Cell, which followed the same basic principle as Genome but created the being from scratch, brain and all. It would have been a slow and laborious process, which is why he left that to the computers. Genome, on the other hand, would take only a fraction of the time to create, and perhaps 17 and 18's brother could make it a reality. Gero is now prepared to prepare his most recent test subject. A few years later, where am I? What took place? I remember going out to get some food, and Lapis and Lazuli, too, were going to go find someplace for us to sleep, a small voice pondered as its mind wandered into the darkness. Then, what? It was like a mental tug-of-war, with the intrusion against his mind. At first, it seemed like the intruder would win, but then the voice's owner began to overpower it, using almost unnatural amounts of willpower. The voice struggled to remember, and he flinched in pain as he heard new things in his mind that were trying to block most of what he already knew while also telling him things. Instead, because the voice belonged to a man, the boy took it and used it as he saw fit. He prevented the intruder from making him forget, but he kept the information for himself. The child learned about Son Goku and his friends, about Dr. Gero and the Red Ribbon Army, about ki and fighting, and about what he had done to himself. He discovered what he was capable of, all the moves he could use, and how to use them. He also discovered that the part of the intrusion he overcame was programming Dr. Gero had used to try to make him his obedient slave. His body, mind, and soul were no longer his, at least not the one he was born with. Instead, they were now occupying an artificial being made from the cells of the planet's strongest fighters in an attempt to turn him into the ultimate weapon. This will be paid for by Gero. I have to leave this place and find my big sister and brother. Indeed, their lives weren't wonderful before to their kidnapping. They were left orphaned at an early age and left to fend for themselves in the city's slums, but it was their life to live, and this old fossil chose to take that away from them out of petty retaliation. He would not tolerate it. Then he noticed that his body began to lighten, which could only indicate that he was awakening. Change of scene. As he prepared 17 and 18 for awakening, Dr. Gero smiled malevolently. Although his original plan to take himself and 19 to get rid of the Z fighters hadn't worked out, he was confident that the twin androids would squash the bothersome insects. Granted, the two had not been cooperative when he first attempted to awaken them. It appears that the programming intended to erase their past memories had only erased some of their names and other details of their past lives, leaving the ungrateful brats feeling resentful of his kindness. As a result, he put them in stasis until it was time to awaken them again, hoping that this time their programming would take place. Even though he hadn't been tested, the doctor was certain that Genome would kill the pitiful warriors if the androids didn't kill them. Gero turned to the human-sized tube at the far end of the room and pressed the release button. The liquid in the tube filtered out, and the glass lowered, revealing the being inside. The figure was about 17 or 18 years old, about 5 feet 4 inches, and human-shaped, but it was mostly an insect, even though it had some human traits. The body was covered in an orange exoskeleton, with black parts like the shoulders and long wings extending from the back, and a leathery beak-like mouthpiece on the mouth, as well as horn-like protrusions on either side of the biogem on top of his head. The flesh that was visible was chalk white on the hands, feet, and face. The hands had 5 human-like fingers, and each digit had small, sharp black nails. Lastly, the Red Ribbon Army's logo was tattooed on the chest, and Genome's eyes snapped open as the last of the liquid fell off its body, revealing clear blue eyes. 3. With a triumphant smile, the scientist said, "Ah, Genome, so glad to see you awake. I was unsure at first if you'd be able to fully awaken, but it seems that there were no complications. Now we must wait for your siblings to awake as well. You have work to do." As Genome quietly stepped down from the pedestal he was on and stared at his body in what appeared to be contemplation. Genome stayed silent as he stopped examining his body and turned to face Gero, who had an unreadable expression on his face. At that moment, the 2 activated pods hissed open, revealing a young man with black hair, an orange bandana around his neck, a black t-shirt over a white long sleeve, torn jeans held up by a gun belt, long green socks, and blue shoes. The other pod revealed a girl with blonde hair styled similarly to the boy, wearing a long-sleeved black and white striped shirt with a blue vest on top, black pants, and brown boots. The 2 androids look at each other and see the remote control in Gero's hands, which has the ability to deactivate them. They then notice the stoic-looking Genome, but they choose to concentrate on the current issue. The 2 androids respectfully greet the doctor, who is a little taken aback but happy that it appears as though their programming has finally taken. He then tells them that there are strong fighters at the door who have already destroyed Android 19 and disabled the man who has become an android. "It will be our pleasure, Doctor," said 17, "but first," he said, turning to face Genome, "who's the insect man?" Gero laughed and replied, "That is Project Genome. He is a bio-android I created shortly after you too. In some ways his power could easily rival your own, so I'm confident you can eradicate the vermin outside with no difficulty." "Yeah right Doc, you made sure I was your strongest creation, so I'm assuming this guy's a pushover," 17 sneered. He then turned to face Genome and grinned aggressively, asking, "What do you think, Bug Boy? Do you want to compete to see who is stronger?" Jero became agitated and said, "That's 17 enough. I didn't wake you up to engage in a juvenile altercation in my laboratory, so go ahead and, he concluded with a bewildered groan as a now smirking 18 abruptly swiped the remote control he was holding. Jero glared at the blonde girl, saying, 18, what are you doing? Give it to me now." Still smirking, 18 crushed the remote as one would a soda can. 18, Jero let out a cry of rage and mild panic. The lab door was blasted off its hinges at that moment. When the smoke had cleared, a diverse group of fighters stood in the doorway, including the Namekian Piccolo, the bald monk Krillin, the Triclops Tien, the Scion Prince Vegeta, and his time-traveling son Trunks. Trunks was looking at the androids with horror, so Tien turned to him and asked, "So, are these the androids you mentioned?" "Why yeah, that's them, although, I don't know what that bug thing is," Trunks stammered. "It doesn't matter, they'll all fall the same way," Vegeta sneered. In the meantime, Dr. Jero was yelling obscenities. This was the worst thing that could have happened. The Z fighters, all of whom were more powerful than his first calculations had indicated, were at his door, and two of his creations were clearly rebelling. Suddenly, it hit him. Jero turned to the bio-android and exclaimed, "Genome! Take them all out!" Desperately, Jero yelled again, "Genome, as your creator, I tell you to kill out all these vermin at once." But the bug-like warrior only observed him impassively. "Follow my instructions," he said softly. "My name isn't Genome." Because it was a little boy's voice. What was that? "Stop wasting your time, Genome, and trash your worthless prototype," Jero shouted in a very frantic tone. A scowl covered Genome's beak-like mouth, and his eyes blazed ominously. He roared in wrath, "I said, my name isn't Genome, you old fossil." Jero's head bounced along the ground until it landed in front of the Z fighters. This action caught everyone off guard, with only 17 and 18 able to conceal their surprise. He then drew his arm back and made a slashing motion that caused a narrow wave of ki to shoot out like a guillotine. The wave caught the surprised doctor under the chin, lopping his head clean off. With a crouch, Jero said, "You wretched brats. I made you, and this is your way of paying me back." The scientist was killed as 17 leaped into the air and landed hard on his skull in a move that was nearly too quick to follow. The male android straightened up and turned to face the bio-android, grinning, saying, "Looks like I misjudged you, Bugman. Looks like you're alright after all." As he made his way back to his sister, he muttered absently. Bugman retorted, "Don't call me that," although his tone wasn't as abrasive as Jero's. "And don't call me Genome either. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. Despite the fact that I appear different, I thought you would have understood it by now, dude." "Hey, you seem chatty all of a sudden. And what's with that familiar tone?" 18 replied, looking amused. "In my opinion, we have never met. In any case, what kind of name is Naruto? In any case, Genome sounds far superior to fish cake." "Do you not remember the now-named Naruto?" asked the girl, looking at her bewildered. For, with hesitation, he asked, Vegeta finally ran out of patience before either sibling could reply, saying, "Enough of this stupidity," he shouted before launching a powerful ki blast at the group. Acting swiftly, Naruto positioned himself in front of the blast. He was aware that the blast would not harm any of the androids, but he still wanted to test out one of his new body's capabilities. The ki attack connected, but rather than detonating as it should have, the energy appeared to be absorbed into Naruto's skin. Naruto experienced a gratifying surge of power as his muscles briefly expanded to the size of a bodybuilder's before contracting back to their normal size. 5. Naruto sighed in satisfaction and narrowed his eyes at the self-proclaimed Prince of all Saiyans. "Are you okay? We're having a conversation right now, you moron with the spiky hair," Naruto snarled. Krillin worried as the spiky-haired moron raged, saying, "Guys, be careful. He's also capable of absorbing energy." "No shit, Sherlock," the bio-android responded to the monk, then turned to the other two and said, "Come on, let's go somewhere quiet. I think the three of us are going to have a lot to discuss." The twins exchanged glances before 17 shrugged and said, "Why not? It might pass the time, and then we could have some fun chasing Goku." When she saw a third pod in the room with the number 16 on the lid, 18 exclaimed, "Hold up," adding, "I want to wake this guy up." If Jero thought it was a good idea to keep him locked up while letting us free, I'd bet we'd get along with this guy just fine. One Z Fighters member vehemently objected with her choice, but the other two boys were fine with it and gave her the all clear. "All of us will perish if they release that android." Trunks cried before going to Super Saiyan and firing an even larger ki blast than his father with a shout of, "No." Naruto Uzumaki, Jinchuriki to the nine-tailed fox, son of Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki, reincarnation of the youngest child of the Sage of the Six Paths, and hero of the Fourth Shinobi War, was dying, after a long and difficult battle involving the blonde and his allies fighting numerous reanimated ninja, White Zetsu clones, Obito Uchiha, Madara Uchiha, and finally the Demoness Kagaya. Naruto's body was finally succumbing to his injuries and exhaustion. It was only due to both his status, bloodline, and stubborn personality that he'd held on this long, as most people would have succumbed long ago. Unfortunately, everyone has a limit, and Naruto has both reached and surpassed his. With what little strength he had left, Naruto said farewell to all of his friends and companions, encouraging them to move on without him to bring about a better world, and by the end of it all there wasn't a dry eye to be seen. Confident that the world was in capable hands, Naruto passed with no regrets, but he did give the world one last gift. Utilizing his abilities as a sage, as well as the powers of Asura, Naruto's soul was able to live on after his body gave out. His disembodied soul then went around the planet, picking up any lingering negative energy that remained from the past few centuries of violence and bloodshed, taking them into himself to ensure that the world will be at peace at long last. Fulfilling his role as the child of prophecy, Naruto's soul then took the negative energy along with itself deep within the earth to make sure nothing else like the Shinobi World Wars ever happens again, and peace reigned throughout the world. Years passed, and the elemental nations prospered, no longer focusing on militant applications. The people were able to focus on other pursuits such as improving the technology in the world. Eventually the usage of both shinobi and chakra grew out of fashion in times of peace, and the hidden villages became bustling metropolises. The Bijou, feeling that their presence may at one point disturb the peace the humans had, decided to go off to parts unknown, and no one saw them for many, many years. People began to use technology more than chakra as it was easier and more available to use. Soon most forgot the old, violent ways, with people only speaking of ninjas as myths and legends. Only a few holding onto some of the shinobi way. While chakra itself fell out of use, people did still utilize the physical aspects of it from time to time, usually those heavily involved in the martial arts, but it gained a new name, Ki. Throughout all this, Naruto's soul remained nestled in the earth, absorbing any buildups of negative energy to prevent it from harming humanity. Then, one day everything changed. A new guardian for the earth, called Kami, had decided to make 7 magical orbs called Dragon Balls that, when gathered, could grant a person one wish. He used powerful abilities to create the Dragon Balls, many of which were connected to the earth itself. Said powers were like a beacon to Naruto's wandering soul, like it was nature chakra, drawing it in like a magnet. As the Dragon Balls were created, the negative energy Naruto's soul was distributed amongst them, but the majority held onto the ninja's soul as it was sucked into one of the orbs. Years pass, people using the wish-granting abilities to make their fondest wish come true. Some wishes were for beneficial reasons, others evil, and others completely ridiculous. With each wish, the negative energy in them grew stronger, especially in the Dragon Ball containing Naruto and the majority of the negative energy. Finally, one day the negative energy in Naruto's Dragon Ball overflowed and took shape, which is where our story truly takes place. Naturon Shinran, Divergent Point. Son Goku, the planet Earth's current hero, had finally vanquished the great evil known as Demon King Piccolo. The 15-year-old monkey-tailed boy had gone on a number of strange and wonderful adventures, most of which focused on the magical wish-granting Dragon Balls. However, the Demon King was his most challenging opponent to date, and his victory came at a cost. During the battle, Piccolo and his minions killed his friend Krillin, his master Roshi, and numerous other fighters. Even the eternal dragon Shinran was destroyed by the monster. After Piccolo's defeat, Goku was determined to find a way to save his friends, and he sought out the creator of the Dragon Balls, Kami, in order to wish those killed by King Piccolo back. This seemingly innocent wish is what caused the negative energy trapped within the 7-star ball, as well as the soul of the Earth's previous hero, to be released. A strange creature was seen standing with a stone Dragon Ball at its feet after the balls that were used to revive Piccolo's victims had scattered and black smoke began to leak out of the stone ball that was once the 7-star ball. The smoke condensed into a small cloud over the ball, growing denser and denser before it began to take shape. The being that held Naruto Uzumaki's soul gave a massive yawn as he stretched out his arms, taking in his surroundings with increasing bewilderment. The creature is small, brown, and pig-like, with thick reptilian tail and black horns pointing out the back of his head. It also has long claws on its fingers and toes and walks on 2 feet. What took place? Isn't I dead? Furthermore, why does my speech sound strange? Naruto questioned as he looked around, noting his voice sounded different than he remembered. It was then he noticed that he stood about as tall as the small bushes around him, causing him to act accordingly. And why the hell am I a pipsqueak? With a veil of depression over his head, he got down on his hands and knees and wailed. A lake was nearby, so Naruto ran over to it, noticing that his running was much more awkward than it was before because of his squat legs, and looked into the reflective surface of the water. After a few minutes of staring at his animalistic face, he crossed his arms, squinted his eyes, and nodded to himself. Naruto had noticed something was wrong with his body after he had pulled himself out of his momentary funk. He had also noticed that his body was noticeably plumper than before, and that his hands and feet had sharp claws instead of fingers. All right, I must be having a dream. Assuming he had everything worked out, Naruto practically laughed to himself. That's gotta be it, though. Gurgle, I didn't know you could get hungry in your dreams. He then glanced across the small lake and saw an apple tree close to the bank. Well, if I eat food in my dreams then I shouldn't be hungry in them, yeah? he said with a smile that he thought as he prepared to cross the lake to get the fruit, but rather than moving over the surface like he would in real life, Naruto ended up plummeting face first into the frigid water. He stumbled up and said, "JCK. It's crazy." After that, the changed ninja swam across the lake like a bullet, albeit much more awkwardly than before, and shivered as he approached the beach. Okay, maybe this isn't a dream, but what does this whole thing mean? As he tried to dry himself off, Naruto wondered what the hell was going on with him, but his growling stomach interrupted his thoughts. Thinking that a full stomach would help him focus, Naruto once more focused on the apple trees. Using his energy, he walked up the tree to reach the food that was out of reach. Unfortunately for the youngster, this endeavor failed just as badly as his attempt at water walking, and he fell backwards on his head, saying, "OW. Alright, definitely not a dream. Man, this day just keeps getting better. If only I had an audience watching, then this would be just perfect," Naruto said as he rolled around on the dirt, clutching his aching skull. He then sat up and nursed the bump on his head. A light bulb seemed to go off in his mind, and the transformed ninja then used the sharp digits to scale up the side of the tree. Reaching the branches, Naruto was able to plop down on one of them and grab a decent-sized apple before happily munching away on it. Naruto spat as he got back up, noticing the fruit that was so close yet oh so far away. After he finished, Naruto started to consider his predicament carefully. "All right, Naruto, consider this. You're in unfamiliar terrain, your body has changed in some way, and you can't appear to use chakra for some reason. How did this happen, and where do I go from here?" he reflected as he reviewed his knowledge. Returning to his sage training, Naruto began to meditate in an attempt to collect his thoughts and perhaps recall how all of this had occurred. During his meditation, flashes of events since his sealing passed through his mind, creating a mental image of his predicament. So the world doesn't know about chakra anymore and instead uses an energy called ki. I was born again when the Dragon Balls I was sealed in gained too much negative energy, and the world I once lived in has completely changed, Naruto said aloud before a drop of sweat formed on his head. If someone told me that, I'd think they were a few ramen noodles short of a bowel, or someone was forcibly trying to write me into the plot of some adventure story. But still, he said, glancing at his paw-like hands as they began to glow faintly. It looks like my chakra was replaced with ki, but it doesn't feel like mine is really strong. I wonder if I can use it like I saw those other guys use, like Goku or Tien or that creepy King Piccolo. I suppose there's only one way to find out. Taking a deep breath, Naruto leaped off the branch he was on, and instead of falling like a stone, he hovered in the air like a feather. Noticing that he wasn't falling, Naruto looked down and saw that he was flying, which caused a grin to adorn his animalistic face. Naruto looked down at the ground beneath him, which, although not too far away, was still a distance for his smaller form, so it would undoubtedly hurt if he fell. Whoo! Fantastic, I can fly, Naruto cheered as he tried to fly around. Attempt was the key word because his attempts nearly resembled a newborn turkey trying to fly. Nevertheless, Naruto was excited about being able to move through the air like old man Tsuchikage. Sensing that he was losing his balance, he shakily lowered himself to the ground with a soft plop. Now let's see. Naruto began as he gathered his ki into his palm. The energy glowed a bright yellow color before a small ball formed in his palm that looked like a raisingan but weaker. With a flick of his wrist, Naruto sent the energy blast to a different tree. There was a small explosion when it made contact, but when the smoke cleared, it revealed the tree was largely undamaged. Sighing with dissatisfaction at how powerless Naruto began to leave as he considered his next move. Alright, I'm here now, so there's no real point on pondering the what-ifs on what happened. The best thing I can do is to try to protect this world like I did before. Maybe I can help that Goku kid. He seemed like an okay guy. Kinda like how I was back in the day. Wow, that made me sound old. Never saying that again. My biggest problem though is I don't really have a strong grasp on how ki works, and this new body is really weak compared to how I was before, so the stuff I do know won't help much. Maybe I should look for a sensei to get me back to my old strength and help me figure out more of that ki stuff, and I really need to stop talking to myself. Naruto then started going over his options on who could possibly want to train him as he was now. His first thought went to Kami, the creator of the Dragon Balls. The only problem with that was he lived on a lookout far above the Earth's surface. Not only was Naruto unsure if his mediocre flying abilities would allow him to get that high, but he also knew from his most recent memories that the Guardian of Earth was currently training Goku to take on the last spawn of King Piccolo in 3 years' time. The latter of which was something he himself hoped to be ready for when the time came, but wasn't sure how he'd be able to get his pathetic body to that level without any of his old techniques. Maybe he'd be able to find a way to use ki to replicate some of his chakra techniques? Though that brought him back to square one on finding a teacher. Finally he remembered seeing that pervy old man, Roshi, who was supposedly a martial arts master. While Naruto was skeptical on being taught by another old pervert, he figured that if he wanted to at least learn the basics of ki, then the turtle hermit was his best bet. So with a goal in mind, the reborn shinobi headed out, hoping to find some civilization where he could find some clue as to where Roshi was at. He walked through the woods for 3 days, stopping only to eat, sleep, and do his business. Along the way he'd try to use his ki more to see if he could strengthen it and maybe see if he could replicate some of his old chakra moves. Unfortunately his success was limited, because while ki was similar to chakra in how it flowed through the body, there were several differences. One of the big ones was that ki was less versatile than chakra. While chakra could be used to shape the very elements, ki was limited to augmenting the user's body and projecting it in blasts. Another difference was that ki wasn't as closely linked to the body's life force as chakra was, and while some attacks like the ki ko-ho used the user's life force, the energy itself was less of a mix of spiritual and physical energies, relying more on the physical realm. So while ki was powerful in its own right, it was just too different from chakra for Naruto to get a complete grasp of naturally. That didn't stop him from trying though. He'd sometimes fly to get a better grasp of it. He'd moved from baby turkey to wounded duck in ability, and would try to strengthen his ki blasts by targeting random objects in the forest. He could now leave a slight scorch mark on them, but would only hurt as much as a bee sting when used on a living being. It wasn't much, but it was progress. On the 3rd day, Naruto was drinking while kneeling next to a river that flowed through the jungle. He was sure he would soon come across civilization, perhaps within another day or two, when he heard a rustling sound coming from a bush nearby. "Hey!" With hesitation, the shadow dragon shouted out, hoping that someone, like a hiker, was passing by and could assist him find his way. "I'm kind of lost, so I'd really appreciate any help you could give me. I won't hurt you, I swear." Gulp. Naruto trailed off as a pack of wolves, not humans, emerged from the woods. The pack's leader was a remarkable specimen, about Akamaru's adult height with a scar over one eye, and the other members were standing closely behind him. Based on their hungry eyes and drooling mouths, it appeared that they hadn't eaten in a long time, and Naruto was in their territory. He also likely looked like a tasty snack. "Well, nice wolves, ask anyone. I taste awful. You don't want to eat me." Naruto laughed nervously as he backed away from the snarling wolves. Noticing that he was being closed in, Naruto panicked. With a shout, he sent a ki blast right into the leader's face. The wolf yelped, but quickly started to growl angrily as he and the other wolves continued to advance. Naruto paled, and he gulped. Oh, crap. He turned and made a hasty attempt to fly away. Although his flying was still not very graceful, it was sufficient to allow him to get some space on the pursuing pack. Naruto turned and exhaled in relief, saying, "Wow, that was a close." Ugh. Note to self, look where you are flying, you idiot, he said, yelping as his head struck a tree that was in his path. He fell to the ground and remained there for a moment before sitting up and massaging the bump that had developed on his head. But before Naruto could fully regain his sense of direction, the wolf pack caught up to him, and the carnivores swiftly surrounded the small dragon. Naruto began to perspire, and before he could attempt to flee again, the lead wolf leaped at him with his claws and fangs bared. Naruto closed his eyes and screamed in fear, wondering if this was how it would end, with him becoming a wolf's meal. However, as the wolf made contact with him, a defense mechanism was triggered deep within Naruto's subconscious, and instead of striking flesh as he had anticipated, the scarred wolf's paws sank into his body like quicksand. The wolf yelped in confusion as his legs also began to sink into the strange creature's body, and he tried to flee, but it was too late. In a matter of moments, the entire wolf was absorbed into the shadow dragon. In response, Naruto's body begins to swell outwards, taking on a grayish color. The other wolves begin to back up in confusion and fear as their leader is gone, and the thing they saw as prey is growing larger by the second. Naruto's new form soon emerged. He was similar to his previous form in shape, but his face had long whiskers that somewhat resembled his old birthmarks, his muzzle had grown longer, and his muscles were more pronounced. The most obvious change, though, was his height, as he was now about 50 feet tall. If one were to look closely, they would also notice what appeared to be a scar tattoo over one eye. After a few moments of silence, Naruto became confused because, in addition to not feeling any pain from being mauled, his body was pulsing with power that he hadn't experienced since he first unlocked Sage Mode. Naruto opened one eye to see what was happening and was startled to discover that he was now eye level with the tops of most trees. Looking down, he saw that not only had his body changed, but that he now easily towered over the wolves that had hunted him just moments before. With a grin on his muzzle, Naruto stepped forward with a huge foot and stomped hard, sending the wolves reeling. The wolves could only tremble in terror as they looked up at the giant. Naruto crossed his arms in front of himself with confidence and commanded, "Get lost." The wolves then fled, leaving only dust clouds to indicate their presence. Naruto chuckled loudly before becoming solemn. Glancing over his transformed body again, he exclaimed in bewilderment, "How'd this happen? I go from being a pipsqueak on the verge of becoming a chew toy to being large enough to crush a house. Additionally, my ki feels strange, stronger than before, but with a different quality." Naruto fired a blast of ki at a large boulder and, unlike before, his attack went up in a huge fireball that reduced the boulder to pebbles, too. He looked to the now smoking crater in surprise, and his ki felt strange again, almost like when he would borrow Kurama's chakra, but not quite. Thinking that it might work on the same principle, the newly formed giant went into a meditative position and focused on his inner mind. When Naruto opened his eyes again, he was shocked to see that instead of the familiar sewer or blank space of his mindscape, he was surrounded by what appeared to be purple gummy spider webs. Looking down, he saw that he was in his smaller, weaker form. He navigated through the webs and came to a place where they all appeared to converge. He was shocked to find the wolf leader from earlier all tangled up in the webs. The wolf itself appeared to be unconscious, and the webs surrounding it seemed to hum with power. Naruto briefly grasped one of the threads to confirm that the web was taking ki from the wolf and adding it to the walls that represented Naruto's body. He sat down and thought about this for a few hours, which was only a few seconds in real life, before he was able to formulate a theory. When that wolf attacked me, I felt like my body knew exactly what to do. Perhaps it was putting someone, an animal, or anything else into my body and using its ki to supplement my own, protecting me and giving me strength. However, I felt much stronger than the wolf did, so perhaps my body has a function that increases that strength? Shikamaru was brilliant at figuring out this kind of nonsense, so I wish he was here. It doesn't feel like this damages the being I have in me, he barked briefly before going on, so perhaps this ability kind of allows me become a Jinchuriki to anything, he scowled and said, I don't want to depend on other people's strength in this way, but perhaps I can take use of it. For example, if I discovered an extremely strong but evil individual and confined him in here, I would be eliminating a threat and strengthening myself to face more threats. Yes, that might work. With a regretful tone, he turned to face the wolf and said, Sorry, Wolfie, but it looks like you're sticking around for a while. Don't worry though, I'll release you as soon as I can. Naruto then returned to the actual world and transformed back into his enormous form, saying, Well, it's time to go look for Roshi again. Really gotta stop talking to myself, Naruto murmured as he grinned and started to march off into the woods, his resolve to find the old master restored. After a week, Master Roshi was lounging in a beach chair outside Kame House, dressed in his favorite Hawaiian shirt and shorts, with his turtle shell and staff resting on the ground next to him. Goku had been training under Kami for almost 2 weeks, and according to Shinran, his 3 friends Yamcha, Krillin, Tien, and Kaiotsu were also training independently so they could meet up at the next World Martial Arts Tournament in 3 years. The old master had decided it was time to enjoy his retirement because he was sure that the current generation had already overtaken him and was prepared to defend the earth in an emergency. As of right now, Bulma and the others had chosen to return to the city. Roshi let out a satisfied sigh and considered his options, watch some exercise videos featuring his favorite attractive models, attempt to sneak a glance at Launch while she gets dressed and hope she doesn't sneeze, or take a nap and enjoy this beautiful weather. What's that noise? Squinting his eyes behind his sunglasses, Roshi noticed a small, seemingly moving speck in the far sky. Soon, the speck grew larger and larger as the object got closer. Roshi got up from his chair and grabbed his staff and shell, bracing himself for anything because the object wasn't shaped like any plane he'd ever seen. I muttered as my old but still sharp ears picked up a whistling sound. It almost sounded like a large object flying through the air at high speeds, he said. The item fell hard on the sand a short distance from Roshi with a burst of speed, creating a cloud of dust. Roshi's eyebrows went up in surprise as the dust cleared to expose the landing figure. You're a huge guy, aren't you? This figure, which resembled a giant gray pig or mole, was easily as big as Goku was when he transformed into that giant ape monster during his first tournament. If the creature turned out to be hostile, he would be hard-pressed to defeat it. So much for enjoying his retirement, he said idly, although he was perspiring a little on the inside. Are you Roshi the Master? With a loud, rumbling voice, the creature questioned. Yes, I am. How may I help you? With caution and an eye out for an attack, Roshi asked. Rather, the giant smiled and exclaimed joyfully, Thank God it's ramen. I've been looking for you for almost a week, and you have no idea how many obstacles I've had to overcome. It was really annoying when the cities I visited began shooting at me before I had a chance to inquire about you. Anyway. The creature calmed down a little before startling the elderly man by bending down on his knees and said, "My name is Naruto Uzumaki, and I would like to become your apprentice. Will you accept?" Rosh presumed the man was male. 3. Well now, that's certainly an interesting request. I figured a big guy like yourself wouldn't need any extra strength. Most tend to think that is enough, Roshi said, suppressing his emotions. If he wasn't surprised before, he most definitely was now. Why do you want to be trained by me? After considering how to respond to a question like that since the beginning of his journey, Naruto raised his head and said, "I've recently been able to unlock my ki, but I'm not well trained in it. Plus, even though I'm pretty strong naturally, I want to learn how to better improve myself so I can protect those who can't protect themselves. I heard about you and how you are one of the best martial arts masters alive, so I thought if anyone could help me, it's you." Although it felt like he was hiding something, Roshi used his sharp senses to determine that Naruto Uzumaki was telling the truth. He wasn't one to pry because he had taught people for less honorable reasons than this creature gave. In fact, he taught Goku just because he knew the boy's grandfather and that he wanted to get stronger for the sake of getting stronger. It wasn't common for people to declare their desire to help others right away, but he still wanted to test this beast's resolve, so he chose to play hard to get. "Sorry, my boy, but I'm retired. Plus, I don't think you'd be able to handle my training. It's quite difficult, you know," Roshi replied, waving a dismissive hand. With a determined expression in his eyes, Naruto said, "I will persevere through your training no matter how difficult it is, and I will never break my pledge. Teach me, sensei, please." He bowed once again and requested. "Nope, my mind is made up, go bother someone else," Roshi muttered, turning away. This one had determination. That was good, it would serve him well in the long run, Roshi thought to himself. If he had been paying attention, he would have seen the mischievous sparkle in the dragon's eyes. Naruto pulled out a small, for his size, stack of papers from somewhere and threw them in front of the hermit. Roshi noticed this printed on the front page of the manuscript, "Make out paradise." Intrigued, Roshi picked up the papers and began reading them, but he had only read 2 pages before he flushed and developed a severe case of nosebleed. He dabbed his nose with a tissue and turned to a smug-looking Naruto with a lecherous grin. "You enjoy, I assume?" Writing on an old typewriter with claws the size of tree trunks was a pain, but it should have been worthwhile. "I have 2 other volumes on me that can be yours if you train me," Naruto said, mentally congratulating himself for having the foresight to record everything he remembered from Jiraiya's works as a motivator for the other super pervert. Naruto Uzumaki, Jinchuriki to the 9-tailed fox, son of Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki, reincarnation of the youngest child of the Sage of the 6 Paths, and hero of the 4th Shinobi War, was dying, after a long and difficult battle involving the blonde and his allies fighting numerous reanimated ninja, white Zetsu clones, Obito Uchiha, Madara Uchiha, and finally the demoness Kagaya. Naruto's body was finally succumbing to his injuries and exhaustion. It was only due to both his status, bloodline, and stubborn personality that he'd held on this long, as most people would have succumbed long ago. Unfortunately, everyone has a limit and Naruto has both reached and surpassed his. With what little strength he had left, Naruto said farewell to all of his friends and companions, encouraging them to move on without him to bring about a better world, and by the end of it all there wasn't a dry eye to be seen. Confident that the world was in capable hands, Naruto passed with no regrets, but he did give the world one last gift. Utilizing his abilities as a sage, as well as the powers of Asura, Naruto's soul was able to live on after his body gave out. His disembodied soul then went around the planet, picking up any lingering negative energy that remained from the past few centuries of violence and bloodshed, taking them into himself to ensure that the world will be at peace at long last. Fulfilling his role as the child of prophecy, Naruto's soul then took the negative energy along with itself deep within the earth to make sure nothing else like the shinobi world wars ever happens again, and peace reigned throughout the world. Years passed, and the elemental nations prospered. No longer focusing on militant applications, the people were able to focus on other pursuits such as improving the technology in the world. Eventually the usage of both shinobi and chakra grew out of fashion in times of peace, and the hidden villages became bustling metropolises. The Bijou, feeling that their presence may at one point disturb the peace the humans had, decided to go off to parts unknown, and no one saw them for many, many years. People began to use technology more than chakra as it was easier and more available to use. Soon most forgot the old, violent ways, with people only speaking of ninjas as myths and legends. Only a few holding onto some of the shinobi way. While chakra itself fell out of use, people did still utilize the physical aspects of it from time to time, usually those heavily involved in the martial arts, but it gained a new name, ki. Throughout all this, Naruto's soul remained nestled in the earth, absorbing any buildups of negative energy to prevent it from harming humanity. Then, one day everything changed. A new guardian for the earth, called Kami, had decided to make 7 magical orbs called Dragon Balls that, when gathered, could grant a person one wish. He used powerful abilities to create the Dragon Balls, many of which were connected to the earth itself. Said powers were like a beacon to Naruto's wandering soul, like it was nature chakra, drawing it in like a magnet. As the Dragon Balls were created, the negative energy Naruto's soul was distributed amongst them, but the majority held onto the ninja's soul as it was sucked into one of the orbs. Years pass, people using the wish-granting abilities to make their fondest wish come true. Some wishes were for beneficial reasons, others evil, and others completely ridiculous. With each wish, the negative energy in them grew stronger, especially in the Dragon Ball containing Naruto and the majority of the negative energy. Finally, one day the negative energy in Naruto's Dragon Ball overflowed and took shape, which is where our story truly takes place. Rage Shenron, Divergent Point. It has been several days since Son Goku had died and his son Gohan was kidnapped by Piccolo. It had been such a pleasant start to the week too. Goku was going to meet up with his old friends Bulma, Krillin, Oolong, and Master Roshi, and then he'd show them his 4-year-old son Gohan. Then a powerful and evil stranger appeared, claiming to be Goku's long-lost brother Raditz. It was then that the savior of the planet learned of his origins, on how he was from a race of alien space pirates known as the Scions, and that he was sent to Earth to conquer the planet for sale. Goku, being the noble-hearted individual that he was, rejected his people's evil ways and fought his brother. The fight was brutal and short, with Goku having to team up with his arch-rival Piccolo to defeat his brother and save his son. The victory had a cost, however, as Goku needed to sacrifice his own life so Piccolo could land the finishing blow. They then learned the startling news. Raditz's 2 partners, both much stronger than him, were on their way to Earth and would be there in 1 year's time. Piccolo abducted Gohan to train him because he saw that the child had a lot of unrealized potential in the fight against Raditz. Kami took Goku's body and soul to Otherworld after he died so that he could train under the martial arts master King Kai, and his fighting friends were taken to the lookout to be trained by Kami and Mr. Popo. This left Bulma and Master Roshi to gather the 7 Dragon Balls so that they could wish Goku back to life when the Scions arrived in a year. However, the Z fighters and their friends were unaware that having the wish-granting orbs so close to one another for a long time with their current level of negative energy allowed it to escape and take shape. bringing the soul of a certain blonde shinobi with it. The 7 Dragon Balls were flashing in the back room of Rashi's Kame house. The 5-star ball was flashing brighter than the others, but then it turned blackish and released a dark smoke. The ball resumed its normal orange color after the smoke was expelled, but the smoke lingered over the balls and started to condense and take shape. Before long, a strange creature was standing over the Dragon Balls, staring around in confusion. The creature's body was mostly dark red, with a cream-colored front. It had a large, bird-like mouth and a fin-shaped horn on top of its head, with antennae on either side. Its eyes were yellow and somewhat beady, and it had short, black claws on its hands and feet. The arms were long and slightly muscular, but the legs were barely visible because the creature's somewhat plump body extended all the way down to its feet, which were also bird-like. A thick reptilian tail protruded from its rear end. The biggest, or perhaps the smallest, characteristic of the newly born shadow dragon was its small size, standing barely 2 feet tall, including the horn. Okay, I'm pretty sure I was dead until now, so how am I here? Is this a dream or the afterlife? Naruto asked, looking around the dark room in confusion. If this is the afterlife, it looks like Pervy Sage's version of it, but the most important question is, he said, sweating, as he noticed the stack of adult magazines from Rashi's personal stash nearby. Why the hell am I a fat-ass pipsqueak? He cried in his mind as he stared down at his little, plump figure and, after standing motionless for a few seconds, collapsed onto his hands and knees with twin rivers of tears streaming from his eyes. His skin stretched and snapped back into place like rubber as he shook himself out of his brief depressive episode. He then looked at his body more closely and wished the lights weren't so dim. The physical changes were shocking, but not nearly as much as when he pinched himself to check if he was dreaming and to confirm that the body he was looking at was indeed his. Naruto felt his skin and saw that it was made of an elastic, slime-like substance rather than flesh and bone. He whispered to himself to give himself a pep talk, briefly beginning with the way his voice had changed and how it almost had an electric undertone. Okay, Naruto, think, you're in a dark room in unknown territory, you've been changed into some kind of slimy bird, reptile, thing, and you have no idea what happened to you. Try to remember so you can figure out what's going on, he said. Naruto sat as still as he could given the structure of his current body, closed his eyes, and meditated as the Toad sages had taught him to do in order to gather his thoughts. Although he wasn't one to sit still for long periods of time, this helped because he was able to see flashes of what had happened around the Dragon Balls over the years. Kami making them, those who wished upon them, Son Goku and his friends, Demon King Piccolo, and the recent trouble with the Scions. Naruto was initially freaked out about there being aliens, but he'd seen strangers during his time alive. He was both amazed at how much the world had changed over the years, but sad at the same time because he knew that by now all of the people he knew in life had probably passed away. He put that to the back of his mind for the time being, though, because he knew that none of his friends and family would want to watch him mourn the past for too long. I think the best thing for me to do is to help protect the planet when these, Saiyamen or whatever arrive, Naruto said, removing himself from his meditative stance. If I remember correctly, Son Goku's friends are going to revive him in a year with the Dragon Balls and train to fight the aliens, so I should team up with them and take this time to train myself, he said, raising a hand to his face before a worried expression appeared on his face. In addition to the fact that everything feels different from how I'm used to it, I'm not even sure if I can use chakra in this body. As he experimented, the ex-ninja raised his hands in a well-known cross configuration and said, Shadow Clone Jutsu. Maybe if I can find a light switch or something I can see if I'm doing anything wrong, Naruto thought aloud as he waited, but there wasn't even a puff of smoke in the area. And I really need to stop talking to myself, he said, sighing in frustration. After some searching, Naruto found the light switch in the room. Unfortunately, he was too short to reach it, so he grabbed a small empty crate to stand on in order to reach it. Fortunately, it was late at night and everyone was asleep, or else someone might have heard light thumping and the occasional muttered curse coming from Kamehouse's storage closet. Naruto stood on his clawed tiptoes and managed to reach the switch to turn on the light, but this caused a small electrical spark to jump out of the switch and was drawn to his body. The slime-like substance absorbed it like a sponge, and Naruto let out a little as he felt a tingling sensation. It wasn't unpleasant, rather, it was more like when Kurama's uncorrupted chakra would flood his system, albeit with much less potency. When Naruto focused the power on his hands while recalling some of his previous chakra control techniques, he felt a power surge through his body that wasn't chakra but felt somehow natural. Little sparks of electricity blasted off his hands like tiny fireworks, reminding Naruto of Kakashi and Sasuke's Chidori, but much, much weaker. Did me getting shocked give me lightning powers or something? Naruto thought before he noticed an outlet on the opposite wall. Giving a slight gulp, Naruto walked, more like waddled. Man, he was going to need to find a way to get back into shape. Now he was sorry for all the fat jokes he came up with for Choji as he silently cursed karma, over to the outlet and, after a moment's hesitation knowing that this was going to hurt a lot if he was wrong, plunged his finger into the outlet. The results were almost instantaneous. The tingling feeling returned with a much greater force that almost overwhelmed the former blonde. As the house's electricity started to flow into Naruto's body, the lights around the house briefly flashed on before turning off again as the increasing power surge occurred. In several weeks' time, Roshi's electrical bill will increase threefold and he'll be forced to hold off on his internet porn for over a month due to this. Meanwhile, back to Naruto, his body starts to feel truly re-energized, almost like he did before he died with the more energy he took in. The altered ninja was so engrossed in the sensation that he failed to notice two things. First, his finger in the outlet now appeared more liquid as it slipped into the holes of the outlet. Second, after a few seconds of charging himself, his body began to grow larger. 1. His overall mass increased along with his height and general bulk, his dark red turning lighter pink as he grew larger. Naruto was unaware of all of this, even as he began to stoop to maintain contact with the electrical source. However, he was startled when his crested head collided with the ceiling and he jerked himself into a standing position. Naturally, because he was so much taller, this caused him to go literally head and shoulders through the closet's ceiling like it was cheap toilet paper. Naruto survived the crash because of his gelatinous state, but he was completely taken aback when he realized what he had done and how much larger he was than the room he was in. The Shadow Dragon's limited mental faculties attempted to process what had happened, but he was about to do so when he heard creaking outside the closet door where his lower body was still standing. He hunched down to look into the room and noticed that the lights had been turned on in the adjacent room and that shadows were leaking through the door's cracks, indicating that someone was entering. Oh, crap! Naruto mentally panicked, wondering how in the hell he was going to explain who he was, why he was in Kame House, and why he suddenly broke the ceiling. His yellow eyes darted around, trying to find some place to hide, but soon realized it was pointless because A, he still didn't have chakra and as a result couldn't use his ninja skills to hide, and B, he was a 15-foot-tall jello, bird, lizard, thing. Just then, the door opened to reveal a short bipedal pig in pajamas. Oolong, if Naruto remembered correctly, was standing there while rubbing his eyes tiredly. the talking pork looked at Naruto's towering form with heavily lidded eyes before shrugging, turning around, and closing the door behind him. Naruto waited a few moments before letting out a large sigh of relief, wiping some sweat from his antennaed forehead. It was a good thing Oolong was still largely asleep. Now hopefully it would give him time to think of a way to get out of here without further breaking the house before the door swung open again to reveal Oolong, his eyes wide and growing larger as he took in Naruto's appearance, his face turning the color of sour milk. There was the sound of quickly approaching footsteps. Until Oolong returned and realized he wasn't dreaming. Crap. Sadly, Naruto's big feet stepped directly on the Dragon Balls as he did so, and the magical orbs acted like marbles, causing him to lose his balance and fall backwards. Naruto's extra mass made his falling body like a wrecking ball, and he crashed right through the wall behind him, leaving the majority of him lying outside the house. The pig's yell was so loud that it could have woken up people all the way on the mainland. Well, at least I'm outside, Naruto thought sarcastically as he slowly stood up, the sand cascading down from him in a tiny waterfall. By the time he was standing, the other people in the house had emerged and were looking up at him with astonished, and a little scared, expressions. The first was Oolong, who appeared to be about to urinate. The second was an elderly, bald human man wearing shorts, a Hawaiian shirt, dark green sunglasses, and, oddly, a giant turtle shell strapped to his back. The last member was a floating blue cat named Poir. Before Naruto broke the awkward atmosphere, they all remained there for a few tense minutes. Sorry about the wall, and the ceiling, totally my bad, he said, laughing uncomfortably and massaging the back of his head. That's quite alright, I was planning on remodeling soon anyway, but I think the main question is though, Roshi said, coughing into his hand as the other three faces jumped before swiftly gathering themselves. Naruto could swear he could see the suspicious glare directed at him behind the man's sunglasses. Who are you and what are you doing here? You all might want to take a seat, 'cause this is going to be a long story, Naruto stated, settling down on his, rather generous, but. A few hours later, Oolong had a look of pure skepticism, ignoring the fact that the former ninja could easily squash him like a bug. The sun was beginning to peek over the horizon as Naruto finished his story, and Poir was staring at him with a starry-eyed expression. Master Roshi appeared thoughtful as he smoked a pipe calmly. Do you really think we'll think you were a superhuman ninja who rescued humanity thousands of years ago? Not only that, but the Dragon Balls we kept in the house somehow gave you a second chance at life? How naive do you believe you are? With a sudden, I believe him, Roshi interrupted Oolong's tirade. When I was a little boy, just starting martial arts myself, I was told a tale of a time long ago when the world was in a constant state of war fought by soldiers cloaked in shadow. It ended with a child who had carried a demon help to bring peace at the cost of his own life. Few know of this story, and even fewer know the details. Naruto was it. The other three looked at the older man in surprise as he took another puff on his pipe before continuing. Naruto nods, stated, I think everything he has told us is 100% true because he managed to enter our house in the middle of the night without anyone noticing, despite his size, and because he is able to tell us details about ourselves that only someone who closely watched our behavior could tell. With a smile on his face, Naruto threw his fist at him and said, Thanks, old man. Sincerely, Naruto said that he had been concerned for a long time that they wouldn't trust him and that he would need to come up with a strategy to persuade them. Playfully huffing at the bold guy to remark, Roshi nevertheless reached out and tapped Naruto's bigger fist, saying, No prob. But when the two fists made contact, electricity ignited, and Roshi began to jerk wildly as hundreds or even thousands of volts of lightning shocked him. Naruto was so shocked, no pun intended, by what the simple fist bump did that he jerked his fist back, leaving behind a nice and crispy, but still alive, perverted martial arts master, his beard standing on end. Naruto jerked so hard that he fell backwards once more, landing directly in the ocean. Boom! Break of scene. Shrunken to his former size and covered in burns and band-aids, Naruto lay down on a sofa at Kame House. Note to self, do not go near water, he moaned as he struggled to sit up. After being so horribly shocked that it made him think of being stabbed by Sasuke's Chidori, Naruto appeared to explode when his large, electrically charged body touched the water for the second time. When the smoke cleared, he was lying face up in the shallow water of the beach, blackened and coughing out a smoke ring at his original tiny size. As he moaned on the chair next to him, equally scorched and wrapped, second note to self, do not fist bump a being made of electric slime. When Naruto was finally able to sit, he swore, "Sorry about that, and I promise I'll help with the repairs," and pointed to the hole in the wall that Puar had now covered with a thick tarp. "Don't worry about it, it'll take more than that to keep me down, besides, I can ask Bulma for help with the repairs if she can come up with some sort of invention or something," Roshi responded dismissively. Naruto chuckled as he glanced at his hands before clenching them into fists. His eyes then widened in horror, saying, "Heh, it would be great if she could come up with a way for me to avoid getting shocked when I touch water. Kind of sucks, though I guess it won't matter much until I learn how to control these new powers and body of mine. Oh no! What if I also got startled when I touched ramen broth? Ramen would no longer be an option for me." He gripped his head and let out a horrified cry. "Heh, cough, I'm sure we can think of something, too. So, what are you going to do now?" Roshi laughed, then winced in agony. "The world you came from is very different from this one." Naruto regained his composure and contemplated while, "Well, I want to help protect this world again. While it's not the same as the one I was raised in, it is the one me and my friends fought for. If I can, I want to be able to fight those Scion guys when they arrive. Only problem is I don't have chakra anymore and I'm just learning what all my body can do now. I'm afraid that if I fought, I'd make the situation worse as I am now." After giving it some thought, Roshi decided, "If you wish, I can help you with training. Your powers look a little different than Ki's, but that doesn't mean I can't help you figure them out. Who knows, I might even teach you a thing or two. You know, it wasn't for nothing that I was dubbed the world's strongest," he offered. This startled Naruto, but then a grateful smile spread across his beak-like mouth. "You sure? You don't really know me, and in the short time you've known me, I've shocked you and half destroyed your house," he said. "I'm persuaded that the older age has a responsibility to educate the younger generation." He laughed at his own joke and went on, "Of course in your case it would be the new generation teaching an ancient generation a thing or two. In addition, I've missed having a student for a long time, but it will be good teaching again, and I'm sure I'll have you ready to fight those aliens in 6 months instead of a year. However, I must warn you, my training will not be easy, it might be the hardest thing you've ever done." "Bring it on, old man," exclaimed Naruto with a smile. "Believe it or not, I'll take anything you throw at me." Time jump, more than a month later. Both Roshi and Naruto stood across from each other in a clearing, Naruto now standing at 6 feet tall, his preferred height, and looked ready to battle while Roshi himself was in a ready stance. Sparks suddenly leapt from Naruto's skin before he disappeared in a blur. Roshi himself followed shortly after. During the time Naruto was being taught under the aged master, he had learned a bit about how his new lightning powers worked and was able to shape them into attacks. In remembrance of both Sasuke and Kakashi, Naruto was able to make a replica of the Chidori and all its variants by using the lightning stored in his body. He was even able to replicate Ai's lightning armor in a way that his speed and strength drastically increased, which was good because without it he was slower than Lee when he got his leg broken and weaker than an academy student. Naruto was even able to create some new attacks from his research, like one he calls Dragon Thunder, where the energy is collected into a solid form and is then shot out in the form of an electrical dragon. Naruto was also able to figure out how to fight with his new body. As it turns out, his slimy form was very versatile in way of attack. For example, Naruto learned he could detach parts of his body that he can control with his thoughts. With a little ingenuity, Naruto was even able to use this ability to make clones of himself. Albeit they were mindless replicas, but still it was good to have a familiar technique. He also found his body was nearly impervious to damage when, during one of the spars with Master Roshi, the older man fired his signature Kamehameha wave at him. Naruto was unable to dodge out of the way in time due to him still getting used to moving on squat legs, but instead of being blasted by the key attack, which was thankfully underpowered as it was just a practice spar, Naruto's body seemed to absorb the attack like a sponge, holding the energy inside of him. It took a little work on Naruto's part, but he was finally able to get the blast to exit his body, which missed hitting a nearby oolong by only a foot. After some practice, Naruto was able to figure out how to use this ability to reflect energy attacks back at his opponent almost instantly. He also learned how to shape his body a bit like clay, being able to form weapons and direct his mass into only certain limbs like the partial expansion jutsu. The perverted martial arts master also explained the theory behind using ki for flight, saying that although he didn't know himself, he knew the basic idea behind it. Despite the fact that his body was more suited to his electrical powers, Naruto discovered that he could use ki to some extent. Roshi was able to teach him his Kamehameha wave with little difficulty, and Naruto even experimented with combining ki with lightning, just like he did with the Rasengan. The result was an incredibly powerful technique that Roshi had the Shadow Dragon promise to use only in dire situations. 3. Back to the fight. Naruto and Roshi were fighting in the clearing at such high speeds that an untrained eye would only notice a slight disturbance in their surroundings. Roshi would use a variety of punch and kick combos, while Naruto preferred to use his arms because his legs weren't designed for kicking. After a few moments of this, the two came to a halt, with Naruto using his left hand to hold onto Roshi's kick while Roshi's right fist was blocked by both of his arms in a guard position. They remained in this position, each attempting to overwhelm the other before Naruto grinned. Roshi turned pale as Naruto yelled, "Dragon Thunder," as the antenna on his forehead began to flash. They looked at each other for a minute before Roshi relaxed his position. Naruto followed, and the two bowed to each other. Roshi was barely able to dodge in time, but he had to slightly lower his guard in order to do so, which allowed Naruto to take some of the electric slime in his chest to form a third fist that got the man right in the face. The two broke apart and skidded back several feet before coming to a rest. As he wiped some of the blood from his mouth, Roshi remarked, "That was very good, Naruto. You are quickly on your way to becoming one of the strongest fighters on the planet. I'd say another couple months and you'll be ready to fight the Scions when they arrive." "So what's next for the training, old man?" asked Naruto with a proud smile. Roshi then took a deep breath and replied, "It is getting to the point where I can't teach you much more myself. I would recommend you go find one of my other former students like Krillin or Yamcha and train with them. I'll take you to Bulma's place in the city where she can contact one of them, because from what I heard they all got back from their own training with Kami the other day. Once there, you might also want to talk to Bulma, because I talked to her and she said she had some things that she believes will help you out." Naruto was a little sad to be leaving the man who had been willing to teach him for so long, but he also understood that if he wanted to be strong enough to defend this world, he needed to increase his training. With that, the two boarded Rashi's capsule airplane and headed for Bulma's place, where Naruto couldn't help but smirk to himself. Naruto yawned and arched his back, causing it to crack in multiple places. He muttered to himself as he left his comfortable bed and headed to the bathroom across the room. Once there, he splashed his face with cold water from the sink, which helped to flush out any last traces of drowsiness. He blinked his eyes dry, and he couldn't help but smile when he saw himself in the mirror. For him, that was one of the main benefits of becoming a god, as it made him nostalgic about how he got to be where he was now. Several decades after defeating Kaguya and bringing peace to the elemental nations, Naruto had passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 109, expecting to find himself in the pure realm. The former 7th Hokage was surprised to find him face to face with Hagoromo Otsutsuki in the outer space-like place the two had first met. The sage had greeted him warmly and informed the deceased ninja that thanks to his actions in life and for ridding the world of its cycle of hatred, Naruto had been given the opportunity to have god status after passing on. At first the whiskered man was hesitant, feeling that accepting this title would prevent him from seeing his friends and family in the afterlife, but the teacher of Ninshu assured him that with his new title and abilities, Naruto would be free to not only explore all parts of the spirit world, but that of the living world as well. After hearing all the pros and cons his new position would entail, Naruto decided to accept, and as soon as he did, his old man's body regained the form it had when he was in his prime and had been that way ever since. The blonde god watched as the world he grew up on continued to evolve and change, and a few centuries after his ascension, the world eventually grew out of and forgot the old shinobi system. While he was saddened by this, he did agree that the system had become obsolete with the peaceful environment and rise in technology. Eons have passed since then, and Naruto has done a lot of things to keep himself busy and to live up to his new role as the god of heroes. One of his main responsibilities was to help train new heroes every few generations if they proved worthy, so they would be able to face any threats to their world. But even though the world forgot about chakra and its hidden villages, people learned new fighting techniques that required the use of only yang chakra, or ki as it was now called. Although ki lacked the versatility of pure chakra, it was easier to access without the use of chakra points, which had become dull after generations of inactivity, and it had strong offensive power. Naruto himself learned how to use ki a while back, but he preferred using chakra because he thought it had more potential than ki and was easier to use. Gradually, the number of people who used ki also started to decline because they had no need for it, and the number of earthly heroes that Naruto trained decreased to a crawl. The blonde had taken to napping on occasion to help pass the time when he wasn't training or helping others train. He didn't nap for centuries like that lazy bastard Beerus. Only a decade or two was usually enough to satisfy him. Even after all these years, Naruto still hated being inactive. It was from one of these naps that Naruto had just awoken from, and he was eager to see how the world had changed in the last decade, quickly changing out of his pajamas, that he kept the same style from when he was a boy. Naruto put on his orange and black kimono that had the Uzumaki spiral in the back, his sandals, and finally his leaf headband that he tied to keep his wild blonde hair back. It had grown longer again, almost to his father's length thanks to a decade of not getting cut. It was a bit more formal than he would usually prefer, but the ninja-turned-god knew he had a certain image that he needed to at least try and uphold. Even though he was still not one for ceremonious garb, morning preparations done, Naruto disappeared from the bathroom and reappeared in the dining room in a flash of light. "Ah, I see you've awoken Lord Naruto, right on schedule as usual, a composed voice stated. A blue-skinned humanoid man with wavy white hair stood beside the table, wearing formal clothing and holding an elegant staff with a brilliant green sphere floating on its head. You know how I feel about that, Lord Stuff, Key, One. Honestly, if I didn't know better I'd say you did it just to annoy me, Naruto said, laughing before expressing frustration. Oh, forgive me, my lord, I will correct my grammar at once. I live to serve, after all, says the now-named Key with a smile and a humorous tone. Naruto wiped a tear from his eye and remarked, "Aw man, I never get tired of that bit, but honestly, it's nice to see you, Key. I hope things weren't too dull while I was sleeping." They stared at each other for a minute before laughing. Being unable to sleep yourself must be awful. Think nothing of it, Naruto. After millennia, one does find ways to entertain oneself even without the need for sleep. Now, I take it you'll have the usual for breakfast? Key waved his hand dismissively. As Naruto sat down at the dining table and took up a pair of chopsticks, his smile transformed into an eager smirk. "Lay it on me," he said to his teacher, waiter, or friend. "I've taken the liberty of introducing ramen to over 500 different star systems, Naruto, and as a result there are now over 278 new flavors for you to try," Key told the blonde, who had already emptied and stacked a third of the bowls as he eagerly tore into another one. Key tapped his staff on the ground, and the long table was covered in numerous bowls, each stuffed to the brim with ramen. "So much, have things changed in any slurp ways while I was asleep?" As he kept shoving noodles into his mouth, Naruto inquired. "Well, about 5 years ago the inhabitants of Yardrat have successfully been able to replicate your teleportation technique using Key, though they need to locate another Key signature to latch onto," Key hummed as he peered into the ball on his staff. As he worked on his final 5 bowls, Naruto thought, well, it'll be kind of like a Hiraishin technique only using Key signatures instead of seals. Interesting. Good for them though. The Yard Rats are good people and it's always nice to help out, he said. Key went on, let's see now. Oh, there have been several planets laid claim to by the Planet Trade Organization. I swear, if someone doesn't step up to those ice lizards and their goons soon, I might have to get involved myself. Naruto scowled as he placed the last bowl in the pile of dirty dishes. The PTO had been annoying him for a while now because of that cold family, who were in charge of clearing planets of their inhabitants for sale to the highest bidder. Perhaps so, but you'll need to wait a bit longer before you're allowed to interfere. Hopefully a hero will come soon that can do something before then, Key said, teleporting the plates away to be washed with a wave of his staff. Naruto complained about this because it was one of the limitations he detested about his new role. He could train prospecting heroes to fight threats, but he couldn't get involved himself unless the threat was too great for anyone else in the universe to handle. Additionally, since most people who attempt to oppose Frieza die before Naruto can reach them, it might soon come to that. He had high hopes for that Bardock guy from Planet Vegeta, but even he died after one blow. Naruto appreciated that type of moxie, though, and had trained the Scion for a few years before letting his soul go to the afterlife. At least if Bardock was ever brought back to life, he would be able to deal with any adversary. And this just happened recently, but someone was able to get to King Kai's planet after traveling Snake Way, Naruto said, gesturing for Key to continue, in an attempt to distract himself. With an amazed expression on his face, Naruto leaned back and said, "No shit? Who's the fortunate one to have to endure King's terrible jokes? It seems like ages have passed since anyone has truly managed to reach his world." Ki briefly regained his focus and reported, apparently it's the Earth-born Scion's son Goku, Naruto. He died in a fight against his older brother when said brother tried to force him to massacre the Earth's population by kidnapping his son. The Guardian of Earth spoke with King Yema and convinced him to allow Goku to train with King Kai, as 2 more Scions are to arrive in 6 months' time in order to destroy the Earth. As he took in this information, Naruto scowled and said, Goku, huh? I believe that was the name of Bardock's child when he first arrived on Earth. Didn't he also vanquish the Red Bow Army just before I fell asleep? Red Ribbon Army, sir, and correct on both accounts. In addition, he was able to defeat Demon King Piccolo and his reincarnation a few years afterwards, quite an impressive feat considering how low the number of threats on Earth are, Ki said. After a minute of humming over this, Naruto got up and exclaimed, Come on, Ki. We're going to King Kai's world, and I think I've discovered my next pupil. A few minutes later, King Kai's planet. Son Goku was panting as he attempted to capture Bubbles, King Kai's pet monkey. Normally, this would be an easy task for the Earth-raised Scion, but because the small planet had a gravity 10 times that of Earth, he was finding it difficult to get even close to the monkey. Nevertheless, he refused to give up. His family and friends were depending on him, and if capturing Bubbles was the first step towards achieving that, then by golly he was going to catch him. Goku was about to resume his pursuit when he saw King Kai gasp close to his home. The blue-skinned man was looking away from him into the space surrounding his planet with a look of surprise and awe on his face. King Kai. What is it? Choosing to take a brief respite from his training, Goku inquired. Goku, make yourself presentable, the God of Heroes is approaching, the man remarked gravely as he fixed his sunglasses-covered eyes on the combatant. With a bewildered cock, Goku said, God of Heroes? Who is that? That'd be me, a voice behind him replied. Goku turned to see Naruto and Ki standing nearby. Naruto grinned and held up a hand to say, Yo. He dialed. Goku gazed in awe at the youthful man and his blue-skinned companion, saying, I didn't even feel them approach. Not only that, but I can't even feel their energy coming from them. Wait, I do feel something from them, but I can't get a good read on it. It's like staring into space itself, where you can see the distant planets and stars, but you can't even begin to grasp the immensity of it. Sup King, you're looking the same as ever, but I love what you've done to the place. I even see you have a road on the planet now, on all 10 feet of it. Must be great on the gas mileage here, Naruto stated nonchalantly as he turned to face King Kai. King Kai lowered his head and stammered, Sir Lord Naruto. Having you on my tea is a privilege. Would you like some to take home? The Kai rectified himself after realizing his error, saying, I mean, it's an honor to have you at my home. Can I get you some tea? Naruto turned to Son Goku and grinned, saying, and while I appreciate the offer, I'm actually here to meet your new student. Naruto laughed and said, Relax King, I'm not gonna blow you up or something, that's Beerus' job. Goku pointed to himself as his eyes widened, saying, Me? He inquired. No, the monkey, yes you, said Naruto, rolling his eyes. King Kai asked, regaining some of his composure, Lord Naruto, what is the purpose of your meeting with Goku? First things first, please stop bringing up the Lord crap, muttered the whiskered god, rolling his eyes once more. Second, Naruto said, I heard that he was the first person to reach your planet in years, and I got curious about the guy who was able to make it. That, and I actually have kept a close eye on our awesomely dressed friend here for some years now and figured it was high time we finally meet. Naruto concluded by pointing to the man's attire, saying that he thought it was okay for someone to wear that much orange. Without intending to be impolite or anything, Goku said, raising his hand like a schoolchild to get everyone's attention. But who are you? What do you mean you've been watching me, too? Well, those answers actually kind of go hand in hand. As King of the Terrible Puns mentioned, I'm the god of heroes for this universe. Name's Naruto, by the way. Anyhow, what that means is that I keep my eye out across the universe and see if there are any beings who have the potential to become true heroes, and if they are able to meet the necessary standards, I keep tabs on them for if they ever need my help. If that time comes, I will either step in myself to fight with them or help train the heroes to be able to combat the threat themselves. The former is a very rare occurrence and will only be done if there is absolutely no other option. The latter is more common and is actually why I'm here now, he concluded with a mischievous grin and pointed a finger at Goku. Do you want to be one of my students? Naturally, the other two inhabitants of the small planet were taken aback, asking, "What?" They asked near simultaneously. Goku followed with a "Why?" Naruto clarified, "Well, why see, you've caught my attention ever since you defeated that red bow dash. He changed that to Ribbon Army, and have only gotten better over the years with your battles against King Piccolo and his descendants. Your most recent battle against your brother, in which you gave your life to save your son and the planet, further cemented my belief that you are a hero. Those two scions will be arriving in a few months, so I figured now would be the ideal time to take on a new student. How about it?" Goku appeared uneasy. "I dunno. I mean, I was supposed to train under King Kai, and the way everyone talked about him made it seem like he's my best shot at training for the scions." "Goku, I think you should seize this opportunity," King Kai said, leaning forward and whispering into the man's ear. "While you would undoubtedly get better under my guidance, Lord Naruto is far superior to me and stronger than you can ever imagine. With just a flick of his pinky finger, he could smash almost everybody in the galaxy." "Is he really that strong?" "Whoa, if I had to fight him, I would be terrified," Goku returned the whisper. Naruto turned to King Kai and said, "And that's an interesting way you view me, KK, if not inaccurate. You got me confused with Beerus, because the whole crushing thing with a finger is more his shtick. Great way to talk me up though, so kudos." Interrupting, "Well, if you train with me Goku, you'd get a chance to see how it'd be to fight me in training." King Kai stumbled, "Pardon me, Lord Naruto, I spoke out of turn." Naruto ignored it. "Seriously, it's fine, though I'd appreciate it if you dropped the whole Lord crap. I'm not that egotistical. Have you ever considered designating your birthday as Intergalactic Ramen Day?" Ki said. Naruto quickly shushed his partner in a frantic manner, not wanting that particular incident to be made public knowledge. He was still catching crap from the other deities for that. Coughing into his fist, Naruto turned back to Goku and King Kai, back on topic. "So anyway Goku, you don't need to worry about the whole training thing. I'm sure in the 6 months until the scions arrive on Earth, both me and King Punz-a-lot over there will be able to teach you everything we know, and while I may be stronger than him, King Kai has knowledge on techniques that even I can't do, especially when it comes to ki." Although this sounds like something I'd want to do, Goku tilted his head and asked, "Would I even have time to train with both you and King Kai? After all, I'll need every moment to concentrate on strengthening myself because the scions are expected to arrive in roughly 6 months. Wouldn't training under 2 professors make that much more difficult?" "Don't worry about that, my friend here has a unique ability to slow time to a crawl for a decent amount of time, so we'd be able to turn a week's worth of training into several months, Naruto said with a comforting smile as he gestured to Ki. Ki nodded and agreed. Hey, that sounds like the hyperbolic time chamber at Kami's lookout, Goku remarked, his eyes widening in realization. Ah yes, I remember that place. I, along with several other powerful beings, decided long ago to combine our unique talents in creating a dimension existing for the sole purpose of pushing others past their limits. I'm glad to see it's still functional, too, Ki cheerfully told the Earthborn Scion. Goku smiled eagerly after taking in this knowledge, saying, all right, then. I have nothing to lose if that's the case, so when should we proceed? Naruto said, well, if it's okay with both you and King Kai, I'll stick around to observe your training for a few months, and when you both feel satisfied with your training I'll take you back to my place for my own personal training. We should have you more than strong enough to fight the meathead and the talking Napoleon complex in no time. What? Goku inquired at the final section. While Ki opted to float up into the air for a bird's eye view, Naruto said, you'll understand when you see the Science. Anyway, I think you were doing some training when we arrived, so don't let us hold you up, K, as he moved to sit outside of Goku's training grounds. A chair made of soft earth rose out of the ground to accommodate him. Goku was thrilled as he resumed his training in earnest. Although he was unable to get a good sense of Naruto's true strength, he reasoned that if the young god was respected so much by King Kai, one of the galaxy's most well-known martial arts masters, then he must be good. In addition, the fact that the whiskered god was moving around on a planet with 10 times Earth's gravity as easily as breathing suggested that he had years of experience with power to match, so Goku believed that if he was trained by Naruto, he had a very good chance of actually defeating the Scions. King Kai had acknowledged that the Scions were stronger than him, but the Blue Kai treated Naruto as though he were on a completely different playing field than the Scions, so if he was to train under Naruto, he would have to finish King Kai's training first. 5 months, 2 weeks later, Scions will arrive in 1 week. Goku's vision swam for a minute as he caught his bearings after using Naruto's teleportation technique. After the vertigo subsided, he looked around. The blonde former shinobi had taken him, Ki, and Goku to what appeared to be a lush forest with a lovely clearing in the middle. There were 3 training posts and what appeared to be a large memorial stone in the background. 3. Based on the strain on his body, the gravity here was about the same as it was on King Kai's planet. The earth raised Scion, and he was brought back to his new teacher as he began speaking to him. So this place is the training field where most of your lessons will take place. Since you've gotten used to training under intense gravity, one of the things I'm going to do here is increase the gravity every time you get used to the new one, like so, Naruto said, placing his palm on the ground where what appeared to be intricate writing spread out of his hand. The writing vanished into the ground as the gravity suddenly doubled in strength, causing Goku to grunt from the effort, while Naruto and Ki didn't even appear to notice. The next thing I'm planning on teaching you is some different battle strategies and techniques I've learned over the years, and since I've actually trained a couple Scions in my time, I have some ideas how to teach you, Naruto said. Hey Ki, would you mind starting your time slowdown thingy? Naruto said, turning to face his friend. There, now I can hold this up for roughly a year, which is about a week in real time, Ki told them, mocking the fact that his method was called a thingy, but he still obeyed as he tapped his staff on the ground, creating a huge blue dome that covered the surrounding area and stretched for miles. Before guiding Goku down a path into the forest, Naruto gave the man the thumbs up. When they arrived at the end of the path, a large building with an oriental design and a large kanji for fire written on the front stood in another clearing. Goku was given the grand tour of what he was told was Naruto's home, and he was left speechless as the building appeared even larger inside. Naruto put an arm around the Scion's shoulder and gave him a tour, showing him the house, which was a fairly opulent, if somewhat Spartan, home with all the essentials but not overly decorated interior. Near the end of the tour, Goku noticed a hallway with 9 enormous doors on either side, each with the numbers 1 to 9, 4. "I notice you've seen my roommate's rooms," Naruto said with a smile as he saw Goku observing.